So, as Tom said, it was the 2021 ISA demographic survey, which doesn't mean it ended in 2021. So we ran it from May 2021 to May 2022, though most of the answers were given in 2021. There were almost 600 people who completed the survey. I think there were probably like at least as many people who started the survey but didn't finish it. We know it was a very long survey, and in 2021, Google surveys didn't have a saving option. So if your internet died or whatever other bug happened, you had to start from scratch again, and most Slackliners are not willing to do that. So we've lost a lot of entries through that. This was the fourth demographic survey that's been done in the Slackline world, and yes, and the third one from the ISA. And this survey was done in 6 different languages, all in one. So the most were filled in English, and then next was Spanish and French and German were quite similar, and then a few in Portuguese and Polish. What I've done here now for this presentation, the whole report is basically a slideshow and made a PDF out of it for later. But here I've just taken out you can still see the questions that are not safety relevant, and that's just taken out the graphs. So if you're interested in the other answers, you can have a look at the whole report when it's published, hopefully later today or tomorrow. I'll do a blog post and we can share it on social media. Just a quick overview, like you can see here. It's a very long, it's only basically graphics, like just 113 pages of pictures, basically. Not a lot of text, so you don't have to read too much if you're going through it. I'm just going, questions. How long have you been actively slacklining? You see through the years, it's always kind of, if you compare the age of the people who participated and how long have been actively slacklining, it just goes up. Even though I'll show you later that actually 72% of the people who answered the survey were new to our surveys. So we'll see. A lot of people slackline less often than they used to. There's no comparison in this to the past surveys, but either you can look at the graphs are about the same and the questions were the same, so you can compare them next to each other, or we can also make for the questions that are very interesting to compare year to year, we can give out a few graphs in comparison. We can ask on social media what questions people want to see most compared, and then we can give out those graphs as well. Because I've set it up so you compare, like it's all in one list, and you can make models that compare the different years easily. It's just not as nice to look at and very confusing to put it all in one report. You can see the knowledge curve. It's maybe interesting for safety. That hasn't changed much over the years, actually. Then gear-wise, it's always a safety relevant thing. People start with short lines, and most people have a setup. And people still have long lines, but I can tell you they don't long line that often anymore. Because of safety relevant reasons, long line is quite sketchy. If you set up your high lines correctly, the injury rate is probably lower than on long lines. Yes. teaching rigging in different slackline disciplines can be quite important. And in the past, mentoring has been a big part of our sport. It has changed a bit more towards, because online you can find more resources these days than you did 10 years ago. So a lot of people tend also to learn through those. But mentoring is really a big part of our sport, and I think it's a very important way to keep slackliners safe from rigging mistakes, and like just learning through other people is often much better than just looking at things online. As we also see in the reports, a lot of people injure themselves. If you look at long lines and stuff, on very moderate lines, like it's not necessarily like, because they're rigged way more often. You can see it. Most people rig lines from 10 to 30 meters way more often than super long lines, which is because you have the spots. It's easier. It's faster to rig. Then so you can see that most people have taught someone else basic slacklining. Not everyone trick lines, so they haven't taught anyone. Not that many have taught someone else to rig to trick line or rig trick lines. And in highlining, especially, I think mentoring is a really big thing to keep our sport safe. So it's very important that we have willing people in the community who take on that role. Well, these are not safety related. People slackline mostly in parks or outside town in nature, but also people highlining or slacklining in the mountains. That has grown a lot over the years. So the focus has changed a lot from park lining to highlining. Not really well, slightly safety related is people creating new spots, and that actually hasn't gone. It's still the same. Like it's a small core that establishes new lines, and it's very important for other people to safely use those lines. Is to show what's safety relevant, and one way for the lines you've established. So one way of doing that is putting your lines on Slack map and then specifying what's important for the lines that you've established. Slackline gatherings here. Here's kind of safety relevant. Most people's first Slackline setup was a beginner ratchet setup, and if you and maybe a third of that, and a third of the people had a primitive setup, which is interesting, but not super safety relevant. In a way, it is safety relevant for the courses we teach, so we know what people most use, so people can do that safely and keep teaching safe practices in those with those setups. How many different webbings people have experience with is interesting, but we don't know which webbings those are, so it's hard to get a safety relevant conclusion out of that. Some people have a lot of weblocks. No, but people have different types of weblocks. The question is how many of those are, and what are they used for? So are people really using appropriate weblocks for highlining and longlining? We don't know that. But yes. Well, how do you tension your lines? That has changed a lot over the years. People used to use pulley systems way more. Now you can see that the pulley systems rank quite low, and most people tension their lines with Buckingham systems. Also, a reason why is that people started highlining more, and the tensions are way, you don't need the higher tensions as you would for long lining. Another thing, when do you stop using your gear? When would you retire your gear? And a lot of people have actually never retired any gear, whether that is because they took care of their gear, or if they were they just not willing to part with their gear. That's another. But a lot of people also downgraded their gear from maybe highlining gear down to rodeo or park lines, or where it's not as safety relevant. Then warming up before slacklining definitely has, if you look at it, decreases the chance of injury. And what else that's not safety relevant? There's a lot of questions in here. We definitely make the next survey shorter. Which mounts do you do is like not very safety relevant, but if you look at then how it compares to what causes people pain or injuries, is that jongo and drop knee mounts are most painful. Jongo mount generally, because people likely don't do it correctly or have prior knee injuries. You see all the red answers in the when they talk about what hurts and why it hurts. All the red answers are knees. So the knee is a very prominent injury prone. Then we're highline questions that were only asked to people who actually highline. And most people were taught by a friend or someone they met slacklining. And you can see that mentoring is really a huge part of highlining, which is great. And then this is the, for me, the biggest safety point of this demographic survey is: have you ever forgotten to tie in to your highline leash or tied in incorrectly? And 19% of the people have seen someone else at the anchor, like not on the line yet, who have tied in incorrectly or forgotten to tie in and stop them. 10% have done it themselves, and 7% have seen someone else already on the line being not correctly tied in or have forgotten their leash. So it's really, really important to do buddy checks. 4 out of 7 highline deaths in our community have been from not tying in or forgetting the leash. So yeah, that's a really big thing. Buddy checks can save your life and your friends' lives. So please do them. And one other thing that we've seen a lot in recent years, that especially beginners tie their leash with a 8 and then put a stopper knot quite far up because the leash was too long, and then get their fingers caught in the leash when they fall in that loop that it creates. So we do not recommend doing the stopper knot just either during Yosemite finish, if you know how to and how to check it, or tuck it back into your harness if possible. Because you want to tie that tail back. We also have a lot of, or quite a few reports now that leash ends hitting people's faces or eyes, which can also be dangerous. So you want to do something with the end of the leash, but don't do a stopper knot far up. If you have to, or if you want to do one, make it really close to the 8 so you can't get your fingers caught in the loop. 80 people said that they had leash related injuries. on a high line when they walked with the leash in between the legs, and 17 with a side leash, which is kind of like represents how many people actually do which method. So it doesn't say that one is more injury prone than the other. 337 people were lucky so far, or very safety conscious, that they did not have any injuries that involved leash directly. And 88 people had injuries from a catch that went beyond bruising or scrapes. Another very important safety point is rescue kits and highlining. And it's actually quite nice to see, because I didn't think the numbers would actually be that high, that 138 people bring a rescue kit when they go highlining, which is super cool. Question is, how many people at the spot would actually be able to use that rescue kit? Like, often it's the experienced person that that brings the rescue kit, and then they go highlining as well. But maybe the other people around, they don't know how to use the kit and could rescue that experienced person. So it's very important to teach the people around you how to use the gear and the rescue kit you bring. And there are also 268 people said they know they're not bringing a rescue kit. So that's really important that those people all think about bringing one, or maybe it's not bringing one because someone else is bringing one already. So that's like, could change the numbers a bit. But yes, it would be important to keep the number of very serious injuries from highlining low, is that people bring rescue kits and know how to use them. So have you ever rescued or helped rescue a victim of a highline? And 88 people actually have as a main rescuer, and 61 people helped rescue someone. They didn't actually go on a line, but they helped pull, for example. And almost half of the people have practiced rescue, which is really good. It's good to practice it once. It's much better to do it like once a month, because you see in the reading certifications that even though experienced people might have done rescues in the past or have practiced a few times before, but then when you're actually in a test scenario or in an actual rescue scenario, you might not be as quick, as safe, or as efficient as you want to be. So it's very important to practice rescues as often as you can. And 111 people have taught other people how to do a highline rescue. So almost half of the people who have practiced the rescue. So that's pretty good. Another safety relevant thing is maybe having experienced riggers at festivals, and say more than two-fifths have rigged at festivals in an organized rigging team, and 61 people have acted as a lead rigger at a festival. So I think 61 people is a lot. I mean, there are also a lot of festivals in the world, but I think we've reached a lot of people who are in those positions. So it's like very experienced people that we've reached with our survey. I guess that those are the people who follow the ISA and are willing to put some time into our community. Rope access knowledge of those people who highline is also very interesting to see for our rigging certifications, and where we could improve in the community. It's definitely an advantage in teaching more knots, or maybe make more posts in the ISA about which knots could be interesting or useful to know. Similar. And then what minimum breaking strength or MBS of webbing do you consider safe for highlining? that had some very interesting answers, I found, because some of those numbers are very concerning. Whether that is because people don't know what an MBS actually is, or if they are willing to go on a line with a low safety factor, that's a question. But I would very much appreciate if people learned what an MBS actually is and maybe looked at a Highline system standard. We've got a new version out since a couple of months, and it's a very good read safety-wise. So have a look at that if you're not sure how your setups can be made safe. Have you ever measured peak loads in your Highline system or Slackline system? And quite a few people have. There's system numbers that maybe could be interesting for Augusta for his backup full simulator. But yeah, you can read through that when it's published. Another one, what do you mostly use to connect your backups to the anchor? Soon loops on the far and static side, and actually weblogs are still very common. Then the next would be frost knots, and mostly not padded, and people don't use unfinished lines very often, which is, in my opinion, quite good because they have a very high error capacity. Like if you don't clip in all 3 loops, then someone could potentially die if no one checks it. And frost knot is still not if you don't do it the optimal way. So I think we're in a good way with that. Intermittent connections, a lot more people use them now than they did 1.5 years ago. So maybe I'm guessing those numbers have changed a lot in the last 1.5 years. A lot of people use, most of us use just electrical tape, like isotape, for the lines, which in wind situations is not ideal. But people who rig longer lines, they often also use fiber reinforced tapes. So that's good to see. Yeah, how do people tension their high lines is mostly 3 people pulling hard on a 3-to-1 with nylon webbing. It's a bit hard to get a conclusion out of those questions, but it's more trending towards people using a Buckingham system than actually using a pulley system with rope. There are some people who seem to tension the fuck out of the lines, but that those should maybe look at the forces they put in the highline. But other than that, yeah, can't really take any safety relevant conclusions out of that. Another one is, we also have a talk on UV later, on the UV study, and how long do you leave your lines rigged on average in hours? And you can see the difference between some people just go for a session and some other people leave the lines rigged as permalines for a very long time. And one other question that's safety relevant is, have you ever found burn marks on your highline webbing? Whether that is from static electricity going through lines and storms, or high forces, maybe on short Dyneema or high-tech setups, which create high forces in your weblog. That's where you could find some burn marks, or maybe also burn marks from freestyling when you leash wraps around the line, or any other objects, maybe head leashes or other things that could leave burn marks on your webbing. Lightning storms or other abrasion on your webbing is also a possibility. So we don't know how what kind of burn marks they were, but they are significant. Like a lot of people have had burn marks on the Highline webbing. Slacklining can help recover from an injury, not just injury. A lot of other questions. Where we are. Have you ever retired from any forms or all forms of slacklining, and why so? The red ones you can see, there's a lot of red ones, and that's trickline related. Trickline because there are too many injuries. That's the most common answer. And also people, the green ones are longlining related, and you can see that longlining is also perceived as unsafe if you don't have the right spot. Have you ever suffered any injuries beyond simple bruises and scratches while slacklining? About half of the people. And half people also witnessed other people injuring themselves, which is, I mean, you most likely slacklining with someone else, so you would also see that injury. 26% of the people have body parts that regularly hurt from slacklining, which is mostly the knees. And 14% of people have suffered like a pretty serious injury that lasted over 6 months, and that's quite serious. I hope those people also filled in a report so we know how that happened and maybe also how to mitigate the risks. Have you filled in an accident incident report form? Philip's going to give a talk about accidents in the last year, I think tomorrow. But 38 people said yes, they have, like for each injury or relevant incident. And 56 people said they would. I don't know if we got an increase of reports through the survey or not. I've got no idea. And 49 people are not willing to fill in reports, which is a bit of a shame because other people can learn and from your mistakes or your injuries, and maybe yeah, it's good that the community learns through other people's mistakes, so you don't have to do them yourself. Not everyone knows about the report system, so it's good that we keep pushing, like, or sending links to the report form on Slack chat when someone posts about an incident, stuff like that. Yeah. Slackliners are from all over the world. Most people that we reach are from Europe and from our member associations. But slacklining has grown a lot in South America over the last few years, and it's very hard to get gear there, or very expensive. So a lot of incidents that we hear about are also from South America. It would be nice if somehow that gap between having safe gear could be closed somehow, and hoping that in the future doesn't lead to more incidents. The age doesn't change much in slacklining. It's just the more older people, because we're all getting older. The people who started slacklining are still slacklining and are still active, getting older. The trend is that most people are still in their 20s, but the 30s are growing slowly as well. That's not really safety relevant, but yes, still 3/4 of the people that are slacklining are male, and the rest is female or has another gender or identifies as another gender. It hasn't grown as much, at least in the survey, as I would think. I think the actual number of female participants in the slackline world is slightly higher than what it said in this survey. Yes, that's not very safety relevant. Still, that most people come from, if they did another sport before, it's still climbing. Like slacklining came from the climbing community. So that's still the case, even though there are less people into climbing today than there used to be at the start of slacklining. How necessary do you think the ISA is? If you give out labels and safety standards and other safety-related info, then it's also important that people respect that and think it's necessary. So 47% who answered the survey think it's very important, and another 46% say that it's necessary. Safety commission wise, or commissions in general in the ISA, that 51 of the people who answered the survey have volunteered in the ISA, and 249 people would be willing to volunteer. So we shouldn't have a volunteer shortage, even though it sometimes feels like it. The thing is, people would like to volunteer, but they don't know how, and don't maybe overestimate the time they're really willing to put into it. So we need intrinsically motivated people who just pick up a project and do it. Otherwise, it's always the same few people who do it, who do the work in the end. Yes, as I said earlier, we've reached 396 people who haven't filled in any of the prior surveys through this. So that's pretty good. And yeah, that's it about the demographic survey. As I said, in the next few days, or hopefully today, I'll create a blog post and put it on the website, and then you can look at all the other answers to the questions and the whole report. Any other questions? Does anyone have any questions? Why you didn't fill in the survey?
Yeah, the question is where it was shared, that I missed that. Was it on Slack chat, Facebook group, or?
Yes, it was, but it was already in 2021, like it started, and it was posted like on the ISA, on the social media, on Slack chat, yeah. But maybe you already forgot about it.
That may be the case. Did you think about making some, maybe 2 surveys, like one super short?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it.
Everybody will be encouraged to fill it because it takes like 5 minutes.
Yeah. The question is, what answers can we get out of that? And
like just the simple numbers of the people involving in the slacklining.
Yeah.
And there is somebody who would like to share more information, then we have more data. But then we have like overall numbers, right?
Yes, it's true. In the next survey, like we've looked at the questions that we had the same questions over the last 3 years or 4, or not years, but surveys. And if the answers didn't change significantly, we're going to take them out for the next survey. So it's going to be significantly shorter, and then ask them maybe in 5 years again. So the next survey should start sometime next year, like in 2024. So it's like every 3 years roughly. And then the questions that the answers didn't change up, we can ask them again in the next survey in 3 to 5 years. So I think the next one will be significantly shorter. And also now you can save, the answers can be saved if you log in with a Gmail address, so you don't lose your whole entries if something goes wrong. which should make it much easier to fill it in. Any other questions? Yeah, the survey before, I think in 2018, had almost twice as many people who answered it. Yeah. The question is also, if you do it every 3 years, who's willing to do it every 3 years? But as we saw, we reached quite a lot of new people, so that's good. Oh yeah, and also I think at Tom's place you have a few Brazilians there. Even from the last, every time we did the survey so far, we do a raffle, so you can win a ticket to Moon Hammock. And there's still, because of the pandemic, the last winner didn't get their hammock. So maybe one of the Brazilians could take a hammock to Brazil and give it to the person who won it last time. And whoever's going to Australia next, let us know, so you can send one to Australia and don't have to pay for shipping. Because this time it's Slacker from Australia. Any more questions or comments? And maybe involve the manufacturers to spread the next survey? Could be, yeah. Could do. Or all the, we sent the survey to our active members and asked them to share it around in the community. So that's where we also saw the spike of people who answered were from our active members. In France, it worked quite well because they don't have a national association, but still, I think most people who answered were from France, or same as German. It's pretty good. Good to see that actually translating the survey helps, because the prior surveys, where we didn't have French as an option, didn't have as much French participation.